Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The Root of the Matter. I am your host, Dr. Rachaele Carver. Today, we are fortunate to have Robert Tisserand, and I'm sorry, your name also?
Hana.
Yes, thank you. I want to make sure I said that. Who they work with an institute educating practitioners about essential oils. So I think this is a really important topic. Essential oils are something that's fairly accessible to the wide majority of people, but I think we need to really learn how to use them properly. And we'll dive into a little bit about oral health, maybe what are the best oils to use in oral, how to use them properly, how not to abuse them. So thank you again for both coming. And why don't you guys tell me, how did you get into essential oils in the first place?
Thank you for having us. And I think we have different stories, so I'll let Robert start because his is longer.
Yeah, it was so long ago, I barely remember. Sorry, that was meant to be a joke. But I was introduced to essential oils when I was about 14, 15 years old because my mother got into it. And I was living at home at the time. And I took a casual interest. And then one day she went to Paris to hear a talk on aromatherapy and essential oils from a French doctor. And she came back with a signed copy of his book. And when I read the book, I realized that, oh, this isn't just about beauty, it's medicinal too. And then I got interested. And that was my introduction, briefly.
For me, it was a sort of a casual interest also. Before I met Robert, I come from the Czech Republic, and Central Europe generally has a very, I would say, permeable relationship between herbal medicine and conventional medicine. So even my medical background family, my grandma was a nurse, my mom is a pediatrician. There's always been a herbal tea as well as, so that was always the mindset. But I got full on interested when I met Robert, who came to give a seminar on essential safety in Prague, and I was his interpreter back then. And I kind of similarly, listening to his take and his very evidence-based focus, got into, okay, so there's really something here. And even though that was focused on safety, it was, okay, so you can approach them in a very, I guess, evidence-based is the right way to put it. So it's not just a feel-good wellness situation where you diffuse essentials, but there's a scientific baseline. And that was 11 years ago. And since then, essentials have been as much a part of my life as they are Robert's.
And what do you think is the most common usage of essential oils?
That's a good question.
I was reading, a couple of days ago, I was reading a report from Bulgaria, a survey, a very good survey. And one of the questions was about how you use essential oils. And I was surprised to see that most consumers in Bulgaria use essential oils for skincare. That's not so common, I think, in the English-speaking world, but it's still a thing for sure. And I don't know what's the most common use, but common uses include diffusing and ingesting, depending on what your background of aromatherapy training is, and maybe bath products, that type of thing.
I think there's a difference between intentional uses and unintentional uses. So I think with intentional, like people actively seeking to use essential oils, I would agree that a lot of it would be diffusing for whatever, whether you just want to make your home smell good with something more natural or it's for a purpose. But unintentionally, essentials are in, I would actually say dental care and oral health would probably be one of the highest, not so clear to everyone uses, because peppermint is in virtually everything from mouthwashes, and if not peppermint, then menthol, which is a major constituent of peppermint essential oil. So I think that would be people not necessarily thinking about using essential oils in the area, but I'd say that's a giant area where essential oils are being used.
I think people might think of peppermint more as like an herb or something, not necessarily the oil. And obviously it has a nice, pleasant smell and it makes you feel minty fresh. What are the benefits of using something like peppermint oil in oral care? It's more than just the smell, right? What could it actually be doing in, say, a toothpaste?
Oh, in a toothpaste. There's not a heck of a lot of peppermint in a toothpaste, but compared to a mouthwash, for example. But benefits of menthol interacts with TRP M8 channel, which sensitizes cold. So when we interact with menthol or peppermint oil, it feels cold. There's no temperature change anywhere, but it's the sensation of cold. So our body reacts to that as if it was ice or some other source of coldness. And the response, of course, in the body is to create warmth. Perhaps going off topic a bit, but that's why menthol is so popular for liniments, for muscle pain, because it's heat and cold kind of at the same time. Is because it's not really cold, but it feels cold, which is soothing and refreshing. Menthol and peppermint. So peppermint oil is about 40% menthol. Menthol is also a very good analgesic.
Excellent. And I know there's some thought, I use a common toothpaste called Revitin, and for years they have a citrus flavor because one of the problems with peppermint, and it depends on the dosage, obviously, the strength, the source of the peppermint oil, but it can be very killing. From what I understand, it can be antibacterial.
Mhm.
So in Revitin, they've been very careful about using peppermint or menthol, whatever the active ingredients, because what we always talk about in biologic medicine is to get away too much from the killing and think more about how do we foster that healthy environment. So having too much peppermint can be too killing, where the idea behind the Revitin is to provide the vitamins, the minerals, the prebiotics in order to support the so-called good bacteria. Can you speak a little bit about the antibacterial component if you're...
It is antibacterial. I think the pretty much every essential oil is antibacterial to a degree, and it's always important to compare them to each other. Another common ingredient in oral health is eugenol or clove oil, and that's the killer. That's the one that's gonna basically eliminate.
Yeah, it's very antibacterial, very analgesic, and very anti-inflammatory, which is why it's so good in dentistry.
Yes, we use that often when we open a tooth and the decay is very deep. It's near the nerve, so we have a lot of cracks where it smells great too, right? Where we can access that usually is something we tell patients, go down to the natural food store, get some clove oil because that will help. Now that's something. The other thing we have to be careful with essential oils is a lot of times we want to have a carrier oil, right? Because if we sometimes certain oils, if we just ingest that or even put it topically, it can burn. I made this mistake with my daughter one time. One of my friends said, I think she had an earache, and I can't remember what essential oil it was, but she said, rub it behind the ear. I didn't hear what she said, and I put it directly in her ear, and the poor kid was like screaming bloody murder. Why does it have that effect if you don't mix it with an oil?
The essential oil itself.
Can I?
Oh yeah, sure. Go ahead. I'm jumping in.
I mentioned TRPM8 channels, and these transient receptor potential channels do figure here as well, because most essential oils interact with some of these channels and they sense temperature changes, but also irritation. And so if we have too concentrated, if the essential oil is too concentrated, these channels go wild saying, oh, irritation, not good. That's one way of looking at it, at least. Another way of looking at it is it's just too much for the skin to handle. Undiluted essential oil on the skin will evaporate.
The molecules will disturb the barrier function of your skin, and it will basically, your skin will react to this concentrated substance.
Yeah, it does disturb barrier function as well.
Yeah, because their essential oils have the unique, they're lipophilic, and they will dissolve membranes, and they will do that to your skin cells as well as to the bacterial cells. And the reason they're concentrated, which is what I wanted to point out, is because they are natural, but we concentrate them. We take plant material and we distill it, and whatever evaporates. So imagine we talked about peppermint tea, right? So you have a peppermint tea. Imagine that you capture that steam, and from that steam, you isolate only the volatile, only the sun molecule. So it's super concentrated from that plant, and we're not meant to interact with it at that concentration. The only time you interact with a concentrated essential oil on your skin is when you're peeling a citrus fruit. Because if you're peeling a citrus fruit, the liquid that you get on your hands, that's the essential oil. And you know that that's not, you need to wash your hands immediately as well. It's not really great. So we concentrate them, and that's why they're so potent, and that's why they need to be diluted, because it's not, the body can't handle it.
Hana mentioned interaction with membranes, and it's an interesting fact that the most potently antibacterial essential oils work because they mostly dissolve membranes, and that's how they kill bacteria. There are other mechanisms too, but that's the main one. But they'll do the same to your skin cells.
Yes. Yeah. Unfortunately, I burned my daughter's her ear skin cells. I didn't follow the directions properly, unfortunately. This is why I always experiment on my friends and family first, and why my children, maybe why they're so resistant to all my methods sometimes. But so that's really important to understand. Like, a little bit goes a long way. So you don't need to have, what do you think are the common or best carrier oils?
Mike, can I pick up on what you just said?
Yes.
And then we'll talk about carrier oils. Sometimes it's useful to use essential oils at concentrations below the threshold where they will kill bacteria. And depending on the oil and the bacteria that we're talking about, we can inhibit quorum sensing. And what that means is you stop the bacteria from becoming virulent, from multiplying rapidly. This is a process that happens. It's called quorum sensing. So when it's a collective decision between the bacteria. Okay, we're going into attack mode. You can prevent that happening with many bacteria, with a few essential oils, without killing the bacteria. The below threshold, there is some logic in using low dilutions.
Absolutely, because like I was just saying, the goal isn't always just kill the bad, right? We have to understand, like, why are they overgrowing in the first place? If you can halt that progression, decrease the virulence, right? We all have so-called bad bugs all throughout our body. And the goal shouldn't always be killing them. It's to be keeping them in balance. So again, and that's why really understanding how essential oils work, I think, is important. It's very easy to go to the store and just buy essential oil and it says, oh, use it for this. But again, that's why I wanted my audience to understand a little bit more about the nuances of essential oils so that we can use them appropriately, not underuse, not overuse, so that we can get the advantage of these natural substances.
Yes. That's our whole that's all we do. We're trying to understand how they work. And to get to the carrier oils, that will always depend on what you're trying to do. So if we're just diluting the essential oils and we're just looking for a neutral medium to have them in that doesn't have any scent, doesn't have any extra properties, then very popular carrier oil is fractionated coconut oil, or sometimes you can get that as MCT, medium chain triglycerides. It's virtually the same thing.
It's a little less greasy than, it's still greasy, but it's less greasy than most fatty oils.
It doesn't have that greasiness to it. It has a very long shelf life, so it doesn't go bad so quickly. It does, but it takes
years,
many
years.
And it doesn't have an extra scent. So it's a nice neutral one that you can, and especially if we're talking about your mouth, it doesn't have a taste either, because it's the coconutiness of it is taken away.
It has a slight taste.
Okay. Is it a taste or a texture?
Because I was instructed by my naturopathic doctor to ingest some MCT oil and to try putting it in my coffee, but that was really bad advice. It has a taste. Oh yeah.
But it's as neutral as they come. So that's your baseline base to use. If you want to add some benefits, then you can look at oils that have extra,
like olive oil and its polyphenols, which are fabulous for so many reasons, but basically antioxidant. There's some really interesting oils like black seed oil. Listeners may be familiar with this in a capsule form. It's taken for health reasons, but it's very good for skin issues as well. Anyhow.
Yeah, and if we went to talk about skincare, and now you have a whole area of using different vegetable oils, or we have hemp seed oil, which is fabulous, anti-inflammatory as well, but it has a very distinct smell. You've got all different.
If it's not deodorized, yeah.
If it's not if it's deodorized, then you're losing some of the value as well. Sunflower, wheat germ, like there's a whole palette of vegetable oils from different sources that come with different extra benefits. But that's more for skincare and skin health.
I know one thing we've talked about on the show before is we have to be careful with seed oils because they can oxidize so quickly, and then they become a non-health item. When they become oxidized like that, they can create more problems. So are you wanting to look for something that says like cold pressed, or is there quality of?
Yeah, I've never understood the aversion to what's called seed oils. Can you explain that to me? Because it doesn't make sense to me.
So a lot of times we think of these omega-6 oils, which predominantly most seed oils are omega-6. Some have the O9, some have the 3. But when they become, because that's what we see in very highly processed foods. And the reason why we put them in those foods is because they create shelf stability, right? So a processed granola bar can sit on the shelf for 5 years and still have the same quality. But the problem is when things are staying on the shelf, if they're exposed to light or they're exposed to heat, they oxidize. And it's that oxidized fat when it gets into our body that can create all sorts of free radicals and things like that.
But are people using oxidized seed oils?
They should.
I think they naturally become oxidized. Like say if you get a sunflower oil, it's in a clear plastic bottle sitting on the shelf with all that artificial light coming on it all the time. So it's already oxidized before you even put it. In and of itself, the seed oil, I don't think is bad, right? Those are so-called essential oils. But in the processing of them, right, if they're heated too high or, again, there's too much light exposed to them, they become oxidized. And then, therefore, it's the oxidized fat. We know that, too, like when we're talking about heart disease, right? The LDL and HDL doesn't really matter. It's the oxidized LDL that really is a risk factor for heart disease.
A couple of things I would say. One is, they shouldn't be in clear bottles. Very good point. Wine bottles are usually colored to prevent wine from oxidizing. from the light sources, and essential oils oxidize too. And we need to be aware of that and prevent that from happening as much as we can. But the other thing is, if you use an oil that isn't refined at all, but just the raw fatty oil, most of them contain very good antioxidants, like the polyphenols I mentioned earlier. It's strange to me that in the cosmetics industry, they always look for deodorized and decolorized fatty oils, which means all the good stuff's been taken out.
Yeah. And that's
Right.
the problem with processing of foods, right? It's the difference between eating an apple that has all the fiber in it and apple juice, right? Because the juice, you've taken away all that fiber. So now the sugar content is much higher, even though they come from the same thing. So anytime we're processing, and that's why the whole foods diet is the key, because when you eat a whole fruit or a whole food, it has all the different ingredients that help your body, recognize it and process it properly.
Yeah, you're not taking it apart and putting it back in. To get back to the recommendations for people, look for fresh oils. And if you have a smaller, if you have and if you're lucky enough to live in a place that grows olives, and you can have a local farm or a local source, not just for olives, but for pretty much any oil, then that's, you see the chain. I think that's true of anything, of essential oils and of fatty oils. The more you can see through the supply chain, the better, because then you have more transparency. This isn't always easy for the end consumer to do, even for essential oils, because a company will claim we own these lavender farms in this state. But as an insider of the business, you know that lavender farm is not producing nearly enough quantity of essential oil for them to supply to everything that the company needs. So you have to go a little bit beyond. But if you can find somebody who's very transparent with their chain of production, chain of custody, like, okay, so this is our chain of custody. If you can trace the processing that's happening, that's always good.
So transparency in the brands, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And is there, think about this oxidation, is that one of the reasons? Most of the time you can only buy essential oils in these tiny little bottles. Why is that?
Why is that? Because A, they're pricey, and B, you don't need very much.
Yeah, it's true. Like a couple of drops here.
If you bought larger bottles, they would probably oxidize before you'd use them.
That's what I'm thinking. And there so you want to look for dark colored, the small ones with good transparency when you look at that company. So maybe could you talk about, let's say, some common ailments? Let's say if you had a sore throat, maybe, is there a specific one or a combination that you think is really good when you're trying to, let's say you want to try to, you feel like you're getting the cold or the flu, is there some kind of essential oil blend that you could use to try to knock it out?
Tea tree oil as a gargle works well, and it helps tighten up your throat a little bit as well. So as well as being anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial.
So you'd mix a couple of drops in with like some coconut oil and gargle it that way, or put it in water?
It needs to be in water. It's not ideal that you only need one drop. It's not ideal that you have a drop floating around on the surface of the water and you put it in your mouth. But if you're gargling, you're going to pretty much mix it up anyway. Because dissolving essential oil in water, as a consumer, there's no easy way.
Yeah. And that we use a lot of tea tree oil in a lot of dental products too, because of that antibacterial effect there. Are there any oils that are more, because the other thing we see a lot in dentistry is fungus overgrowth. Are there specific oils that are more bacteria related, or is this like a substance that's antimicrobial that can do all sorts of microbes?
The sort of heavy hitters in the antibacterial world are clove, cinnamon bark, cinnamon leaf, thyme, That's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. Oh yeah, oregano. Thank you.
Yeah.
Closely followed then by lemongrass and tea tree. They tend to be antifungal as well. Specifically, oils that are specifically antifungal would be citronella or palmarosa, which are high in citronellal and geraniol, which are very good antifungals.
How about somebody who has a lot of sinus, like chronic sinusitis? There would be a certain blend be good for diffusing that.
For that, I would go with steam inhalation. So you have a bowl of hot water and you put a couple of drops is enough, and then you bend over it and you inhale that steam. That's really good to get into your sinuses. You don't want the heavy hitters there because it's very intense. So you can go with
Tea tree is good again.
tea tree. Eucalyptus
Peppermint
would
is
be
good.
great.
Eucalyptus.
Peppermint can be a little strong if you get the
Yeah, it
menthol
can
in
be a
there.
little
So
strong.
eucalyptus.
True.
You can even go with lavender, which is a gentle option, especially if you're dealing with a younger child with congested nose. You want to go gentilation. It's a still pretty good option.
So with a steam inhalation, the water must not be boiling. That's just too much, and the oils would just go.
Get it.
My advice is just too hot to put your hand in.
What about, could you put them in a nebulizer, a drop in a nebulizer, or is that too
You mean like nebulizer as a mask nebulizer?
Yeah, instead of
I mean,
putting your head over the bowl of steam, could you just do a nebulizer?
Well, you can do.
Yeah. You again have to deal with the issue of dissolving them in water. So you might need to make sure that you don't just get the full drop. In that case, you can probably go with a hydrosol. So hydrosol is when we're distilling essential oils. You get you run the steam through the plant material, and then the steam goes through the apparatus and gets condensed. And the part that floats on top that's not water soluble, that's the essential oil, but you still have the water part, which is called hydrosol, sometimes floral water, sometimes hydrolat. You can get it as rose water very often, and essential companies sell different hydrolats. So for nebulizer, I would probably go with that. And if you can get a eucalyptus hydrolat, that would be great. Lavender probably as well. That would be easier for that, so that you don't have to deal with, is it diluted? Do I have a droplet of essential somewhere in the machine that I then need to clean?
So these are not widely sold to consumers, but they're there. If you go looking for them, they're definitely there. And there are almost as many hydrosols as there are essential oils, because, as Hana said, you get both when you do distillation.
I know rose waters. I think I have a bottle of that in my medicine cabinet that are used for cleaning off the skin and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's my favorite toner, has been for years. I use it as a toner, and you can drink it as well. It's used in some cuisines as well, and it's essential oils and hydrolats are just like I love them. They can do them for so many things.
Are there certain essential oils that you should not ingest?
Not specifically. No, not specifically. Except, yeah, there are a couple you shouldn't ingest because they might kill you. So there's a couple of very toxic essential oils: mustard and horseradish. I think both essential oils contain allyl isothiocyanate in high concentrations. This is the same thing we get in cabbage and broccoli and these brassicas. Anyhow, in very, very small amounts, it's fine. It's just a little spiciness. But, and there's a third one called worm seed oil. Now, worm seed oil was used, it's so called because it will kill worms in your gut. And they used to give it to kids with worms. And the advice was 1 drop per year of age. That killed about 50% of the kids they gave it to. Wow. So after a few years, they realized, actually, this wasn't a good idea.
No.
So yeah, no. Now these essential oils, you won't find them. You might if you tried really hard, They're not commonly sold for obvious reasons.
So is that similar to, I know a lot of antiparasitic products have wormwood in it. I don't know if that's related to that wormwood or artemisia. I'm not sure if I'm saying
Well,
that.
there are various wormwood essential oils that are moderately toxic because most of them contain something called fugone, and fugone will give you seizures if you have too much of it. So bad things can happen, but you're pretty much protected by most sellers who won't sell you anything very toxic, or if they do sell something mildly dangerous, they'll let you know why it's dangerous.
And don't be like me. Make sure you double check the instructions before adding it for some kind of ailment.
It's always just follow up on that. It's always about the dose. It's always about how much, you know. Anything can kill you in high enough dose.
Exactly. And so let's keep going with some of the ailments. Let's say you have a baby with maybe a baby who gets chronic ear infections and they just keep going and getting antibiotics. And we know there could be certainly an airway issue there that could be the source of it, but is there a certain essential oil that you might dilute and help with earache?
I would use rosemary oil. 50-50 with a fatty oil, and dip some cotton wool and put it in the ear so it doesn't go inside all the way, of course. And you don't need very much, less than a drop probably for a baby.
Yeah.
I've seen that work pretty well.
And how often would you have to do that? Or do you just keep the cotton ball there for 30 minutes?
No, leave it in. Leave it in and maybe change it 2 or 3 times a day if it's still needed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's great. And I think as a mom, we're always looking for those healthier options. We don't want to be giving our kids so many drugs and antibiotics when they're young, because now we're learning how all of those things can have a major impact on our immune system, right? It doesn't really get fully developed till we're 3. So if we keep pummeling the immune system, whether it's antibiotics or vaccines or even Tylenol, right, that can have a major impact on a kid's overall immune system as they're growing up. So it's nice to know about these really natural products that don't have those long-term consequences.
And it's also good to have, and that's my look on that, is that you can escalate. You can always go to, okay, so
there, yes.
If we need
start low and go slow.
Start low, go slow, and it's like, okay, I've been trying this for a couple of days, earache. I had it as an adult. No wonder kids are so fussy. It's one of the worst pains that you can have.
Yeah.
So if after a day or 2 days of trying this, nothing is helping, then maybe you escalate to the antibiotics to whatever you need.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I had my daughter, we went on a cruise one time. She was getting a cold. We went on an airplane. I think that just pushed the stuff deeper down in. And I had my essential oils and I had my homeopathics and my red light and everything. And she was just in agony. So she had to get the antibiotic eardrop. But I tried all that first, but it just wasn't cutting it for her.
So sometimes we just have to do that. But I love the fact that we have all these different steps when you can go, okay, I'm feeling something is coming on, so I'm gonna gargle tea tree oil.
And that's the best when you're like they said, if you want to nip things in the bud, right? The moment you have that very first symptom, that's when you hit it hard with the nutrients, the oils, all that kind of good stuff. What about, let's say if you have a cut and maybe you don't want to use Neosporin, right? Is there something that helps heal the skin, or are essential oils too hot for that?
You need, when you have a cut, then you're dealing with the healing, but you're also, Neosporin is there to prevent infection. To prevent infection, you can go, again, tea tree oil is a golden standard there. It needs to be fresh. I think that's when we talked about oxidation, tea tree oil, you just need to make sure that it's fresh. Don't put it directly in the wound, but like around it. And watch out, if you're putting Band-Aid on it, it's going to dissolve the glue. The essential oil is going to dissolve the glue. So it's not gonna stick. Yes.
Nope.
Yeah. So you may want to use one of those, I think they're called vet bandages, the ones that are self-adhesive to itself, if you're putting essential oil on a wound. Lavender is great for then the recovery of the skin and the repair of the skin. And lavender is absolutely amazing for burns. I think if you ask our aromatherapist friends, including myself, we will all have a bottle of lavender in the kitchen. Or you touch a pan, you're pulling something out of the oven, you're not careful, or you get a little burn. Lavender oil, in this case, undiluted on that burn, and that's one exception to the rule of not using undiluted essential oils. If you burn yourself, undiluted lavender on that particular spot on your skin that you burned,
Oh, good
it's
to know. My mother always
incredible.
wants me to call her in that sulfurdine. She cooks all the time. It's constantly burning herself. So that's good to know. She just has
Yeah.
a little bottle of lavender right there.
Yeah.
She doesn't need a prescription.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely incredibly almost magic. Like I've seen blisters heal super quick with lavender.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's very exciting.
I used to work for a company in the UK, and we created an antiseptic ointment in a little pot. And I don't actually remember what we called it, but it had a large red cross on it. And after a few months, we got a notification from the Red Cross that, I'm sorry, you can't do this. So we had to change the packaging.
Yeah, what was in it? Do you remember?
I think it was tea tree, eucalyptus, and lavender.
Okay.
That's great because I use a lot of like ozone in my practice, so I like the ozonated olive oil, but that's not always readily available. Getting the essential is having a little mix of that.
Yeah.
It's again nice to have these kind of things in your medicine cabinet in
Yeah.
case, and they're small enough, easy enough to travel with too. Like I always take some essential oils and homeopathics when I travel.
Mhm.
Never know, and sometimes those aren't, unless you're near a Whole Foods or something, you might not be able to find high quality brands.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and travel with them as well. Yeah.
We've mentioned diffusing a couple of times, and I'd like to say that there are obviously different mechanisms for diffusion. And so we kind of classify it by active and passive. So active diffusion is when there's like a little machine running and pushing fragrance into the air. Passive diffusion would be, for example, you read thingies. What do you call it?
Reed diffuser.
Reed diffusers. So there's no active pushing of the fragrance. It's just there gradually releasing its fragrance. Of course, there are other examples. With very low level diffusion, there are no issues. But if the smell is getting a little strong, you don't want to diffuse for a long period of time per day, because it can affect your health adversely over a long period of time.
Not to mention it doesn't have the effect anymore, because you get habituated to the scent. And
If you're looking for a psychological effect.
Yeah, and if you're diffusing in the air, that's usually what you're mostly getting. You're getting the psychological effect in there. You're not.
People use diffusion for respiratory infections, but although I don't think it's the ideal method for that, of course you can do it and it helps, but to get a bit more intensive effect, you could use a personal inhaler, a thing you put into your nose, or a chest rub. I think that's actually a better route than diffusion, although you can do both.
That's very interesting. Good to you. And I recently I follow this blog that talks a lot about, looks for kind of toxic things in common products. And she talks about, one of the previous posts was about essential oils and phthalates. I don't know if you guys are familiar in all this, how, so many products. And I have teenage daughters now, and I keep trying to teach them, like, look out for the word fragrance, right? Or parfum, We also see that because there
Yeah.
are a lot of phthalates which can mess with our hormones, and we find those in essential oils too. They're everywhere, right? We can't avoid all toxins.
Yeah.
But are there certain, and maybe this comes down to like transparency and the way that it's distilled or whatever, you would think a natural, if you're getting your lavender oil from lavender, you would think there maybe wouldn't be phthalates, but I don't know, maybe because they're in the atmosphere now that it's like, I don't think organic exists anymore because there are too many toxins in the air. So,
I've spent many, many years looking at analyses of essential oils, GCMS analyses, which go down to 0.01%. They don't go further than that. So you won't see, for example, heavy metals, but you'll see phthalates. They will come up on the GC. And we very rarely encounter them in essential oils. There are two reasons they might be there. One is gross adulteration. So you might see 10%, 15%, even more of a phthalate in an essential oil. That's adulteration. Somebody's intentionally put it in there for profit reasons. That doesn't happen much in the ethical aromatherapy world, but it happens sometimes.
how would you know? You might not know, right? You have to be careful with
No,
the brands you
you
choose.
might. No, you might not know. You might not know. The other reason you would find phthalates is because phthalates are in plastics. They are plasticizers. And if during the processing, any plastic comes in contact with the essential oil, it may leach some phthalates out of the plastic. Depends on the plastic. It depends on the nature of the interaction. And typically that will be around 1% of the essential oil, not 10 or 20%, and maybe less. So that is hard. There aren't any particular essential oils where this will happen, except maybe for expressed citrus oils. Yeah, so not distilled, but expressed citrus oils, because plastic tubing is often used in the process. The Italians have been very aware of this for some years, and they've taken steps to reduce phthalates and also heavy metals in their expressed citrus oils. And so it's not much of an issue now, but it was in the past.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are reasons why you'd possibly find phthalates.
Okay. That's good to know. We've talked about on this podcast before the way we get plastics into our foods, right? Anything acidic or fatty, which oils are by nature, lipophilic and fatty, can leach that. So you never want to buy, ideally, oils in plastic containers. Right? But it has to come in glass. But sometimes you'll see like products that have a mixture of stuff, essential oils with other fats and stuff, and it's in a plastic bottle.
Oils are diluted in a product, and then it's put in plastic. It would be nice to know whether any leaching happens.
So this blog I'm talking about, Momavation, she usually has people will send her products. So she did one on essential oils maybe a month or two ago. And of the ones that she sent, she had she ranks them from worst to best of the amount of certain things that are in there. Yeah. She just did one on castor oil. I was dismayed. One of my favorite castor oils. She found phthalates in that. And I was like, again, it's like hard to get away from this stuff. But it's interesting to know, like you said, the processing. I didn't think about that when they're making it. Is it passing through plastic? That's how it get in there. So that's where I guess comes down again, transparency of the company you want to use, asking those questions. And if the company isn't going to be forthcoming about that, then maybe you want to look for a different company.
There are many companies that publish a full GCMS report for each essential oil on their website. However, in most cases, if they see something nasty, they won't say it's there. They'll take it out of the report.
That's a very cynical way. Well,
it's true, you know.
Cynical, but maybe realistic. I know.
Yeah, but if you're looking for, and that's always a question. It's like, okay, so how do I know that my essential oils are high quality? Can you recommend a brand? We don't want people to feel like, okay, this brand is always great, and this, because it depends on the different oils that you're looking for. Like somebody will have a great selection of rose oil, somebody will have a great selection of different oils, somebody's closer to you. So not everybody will have everything that you want, but there are certain things to look for. And if they publish the GC analysis, even though as a consumer you might not always know how to interpret it, the fact that they are willing to make that extra step
It's a good sign.
is a good sign.
Yeah.
Having a full botanical name, that's the sort of Latin binomial, like lavender is lavandula and gastifolia. So having those names for each of their essential oils so you can identify exactly what plant that came from is a must. If the company is not doing that, I wouldn't trust their essential oils. Telling you how the essential oil was obtained, whether it was distillation or in case of citruses, expression, that's a good sign. If they tell you what country the essential oil comes from, that's it. So the more information they divulge about the essential oil, the better.
They should also tell you what part of the plant was used.
Oh, yeah.
So I'll often see cinnamon oil. Well, is it from the bark or the leaf? Because they're completely different. You can't just say cinnamon oil.
Yeah.
Orange oil,
Yeah.
another example. Is it bitter orange or sweet orange? Because bitter orange is phytotoxic, sweet orange is not. That's also important in many cases.
Yeah. So the more information they give you, the more you can trust that they're doing their due diligence. And if you can ask them questions and if they come back to you with answers,
That's a good sign.
that's always a good sign. Yeah.
That's great. You've obviously written a very large textbook also on all the ins and outs of essential oils. Is there a website or another place that people can look to get a little bit more information to help discern what might be the best product for certain different things?
Our website, tisserandinstitute.org. That's where you find all of our information. I would definitely direct people to our safety section, which is a sort of high-level overview of all the precautions that you can take to make sure that essential oils do not burn your skin and that you use them to your benefit and don't overuse them. So if you look for safety, we've got guidelines. We also have what to do if something has happened. If you've done something, okay, what are the first aid? So our safety section is very useful. And then on our blog, we give a lot of information, both in terms of how to look for a reputable company, and we do a sort of very detailed dives into if you want to know everything about essential oils and mosquitoes, for example, or how to put essential oils in skincare.
Many of our blogs are more like academic articles than blogs.
We like to follow rabbit holes. But if you want to go even deeper, then we have online classes that people can take, from quick single lessons, introductory, to more involved certification courses if you decide, okay, I really want to know all about essential oils.
Oh, that's fabulous. I know. Yeah. All of us can go down certain rabbit holes and we resonate with certain things. So it's really nice to have all those different avenues, and we all learn differently, right? Some of us like to read, some of us want to hear something, some of us want that one-on-one. So that's wonderful that you have all those different options that can appeal to the mass amount of people. Thank you. This has been really interesting and exciting, and definitely learned a lot. So I'm excited to dive onto that website and have those resources for myself, for my patients. So thank you so much for meeting with me this afternoon. And like I said, we'll direct everybody to yours. Is there any other last little pieces of information or advice you'd like to leave the audience with?
Less is more.
I think that's very apropos. And I think sometimes we always think the opposite, right? If a little bit is good, then more must be better. But that is definitely not the case with essential oils. And now, again, that's why we talked about them coming in smaller bottles, so we don't need a lot.
Yeah. And I'll just add one thing, that many essential oils are antioxidant. Well, they can oxidize, but they're also antioxidant before they've oxidized. But if you use too much of an antioxidant oil, it becomes pro-oxidant. Weird, huh?
I think that's how vitamin C works too, right? That we talked about it. When you have super, super high doses of vitamin C, it becomes an oxidant. When you have lesser levels of vitamin C, it's an antioxidant. So like we talked about at the very beginning, right? It's all about the dosage. So that makes a difference. Of even these seemingly benign things, they can really change depending on how much we're using.
Good.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you guys. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And to the audience, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please join me for the next one. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. Hello, I'm Dr. Rachaele Carver, a board-certified naturopathic biologic dentist and a certified health coach. Did you know that over 80% of the U.S. population has some form of gum disease? Many of us don't even know that we have this source of chronic infection and inflammation in our mouth that's been linked to serious consequences like heart disease, diabetes, stroke, dementia, colon cancer, kidney disease, even pregnancy complications. Would you like to learn how to reverse and prevent these chronic debilitating conditions without spending a lot of time and money at the dentist? Join me for my 6-week course where I will teach you the root cause of disease. You'll learn how to be your own best doctor. Are you ready to get started? Let's go.